Some stories are simple to tell. They flow naturally, bringing clarity or comfort as they unfold. But there are others that resist easy recounting, stories that linger in the heart, wrapped in shadows of confusion and delicate emotions. This is one of those stories, an account not about events anyone would choose to endure, but about the unspoken spaces that can emerge even between family members. It's a tale of my relationship with my daughter, Emily, and how our bond, once defined by the simplicity of parent and child, began to shift in ways that left us both bewildered. In recounting this, I hope to shed light on the subtleties that shape family relationships, on the delicate balance that love and respect require, and on how the lines we think are secure can sometimes blur in surprising and challenging ways. I invite you to walk with me through this reflection as I search for answers to questions that are as complex as they are essential. The tale I'm about to unfold is not a simple one to recount. It's not an ordinary account, and it's certainly not one any of us would hope to endure. Yet, it's a narrative about kin, about intricate bonds and delicate boundaries. At times, the things we assume to be clear become vague and perplexing. It's the story of me and my daughter Emily. Through minor, seemingly harmless interactions, circumstances gradually shifted, and we arrived at a juncture neither of us wished to reach. What led us to this place? And is there a route to return? I invite you to listen and share in these feelings with me. It was a tranquil afternoon. The sun had just started its descent behind the towering buildings, casting a warm amber glow over our quiet community. I was in the kitchen getting dinner ready, the soft murmur of the radio in the background. My daughter Emily had just come back from a weekend away at university. A calm, soothing atmosphere filled the house, a peace born of familiarity. Emily had matured so swiftly. It seemed like only yesterday she was the little girl trailing behind me, peppering me with endless questions about the world. Now she was 21, no longer the child I remembered, but a strong, assured, and sometimes unintentionally distant young woman. The dynamics between us had shifted as she'd grown, and that was something I was still adjusting to. Dinner was ready, and I called her from the living room. As we sat down at the table, I noticed her gaze was different, intense in a way that made me pause. At first, I brushed it off as my imagination. We spoke about her classes, her friends, and how much she missed home, but the way she expressed herself, the way her gaze lingered on my arm longer than usual, stirred something I couldn't quite describe. After dinner, we chose to watch a film together, something we used to do before she went off to university. The living room felt more inviting than usual, the soft lighting and plush cushions creating an ideal setting for a quiet evening. I couldn't recall the last time we'd shared such a calm evening together. As the movie played, I caught myself glancing at her more often than I should have, noting how she'd grown. She was no longer the child I had raised, but a woman. And then, just as an unusual discomfort began to creep into my thoughts, she inched closer to me on the couch. At first, I thought it was innocent, but then her hand brushed against mine, and a spark jolted through me, as if something existed between us that shouldn't have been there, something charged, a feeling I knew I shouldn't have felt. I quickly withdrew my hand, shocked by the intensity of the moment. "What's the matter, Dad?" she asked, her tone soft and almost filled with concern. I glanced at her, my heart racing, uncertain of what to do or how to respond. "Nothing, sweetheart. I'm just worn out," was all I could manage, attempting to brush it off, hoping she wouldn't sense the tension lingering between us. But I sensed something fundamental had shifted in that instant. There was something we couldn't overlook. The boundary between father and daughter had blurred, and although neither of us had crossed it, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken emotions. We sat in silence, the movie continuing in the background, but neither of us really following it anymore. I stood up, told her I needed to head to bed early, yet as I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had irrevocably changed between us. That night, lying in bed, my mind raced, replaying the evening's events. I knew I had to curb this feeling before it took root. I needed to create some distance for both our sakes, but deep down, uncertainty gnawed at me. The next morning, I woke up feeling unsettled, the events of the previous night looping endlessly in my mind. I tried to tell myself it was all just in my imagination. I was her father, nothing more and nothing less. I loved her profoundly, but only in a way that was beyond misinterpretation. I was being irrational, I reassured myself. When I went downstairs, Emily was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a book in her hands. She greeted me with a smile, as if nothing had happened. Maybe it really was nothing, just an odd moment that only I had noticed. "Good morning," I said, attempting to sound cheerful and normal. "Good morning, Dad," she replied, her tone soft and warm. "I was thinking of taking a walk later. Would you like to come along? It's been ages since we've done anything together." I hesitated, uncertain about spending time alone with her after the emotions stirred up the previous night. But then, I reasoned with myself, it was only a walk, just an ordinary outing between father and daughter. "Sure," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "That sounds nice." That afternoon, we drove to a nearby park where Emily and I had strolled many times when she was a child. The air was crisp, the sky clear and blue, and for a moment, everything felt right. We walked side by side, chatting idly about everything and nothing. Old memories, her plans for the future, random stories. I found myself genuinely smiling, feeling at ease around Emily. Perhaps I had overreacted the night before, maybe it was just a fleeting sensitivity. Yet as we wandered deeper into the park, there were moments when our conversation trailed off, leaving a silence that felt weightier than it should have. The atmosphere grew thick with unspoken feelings, emotions I didn't want to admit to myself. At one point, we reached a clearing overlooking a wide, grassy lawn, and Emily stopped, turning to face me. "You've always been there for me," she said, her voice soft yet serious. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Her words caught me off guard. The vulnerability in her tone touched something deep inside, making my heart ache. I attempted a smile to lighten the atmosphere. "Don't worry about it," I joked. "Your old man's not going anywhere." But she didn't smile. Instead, she stepped closer, her gaze locking onto mine. "No, I mean it, you're more than just my dad. You're everything to me." I froze, her words lingering in the air, laden with a depth I wasn't prepared to confront. I searched Emily's face for any indication that she was merely being sentimental, that this was simply an innocent, heartfelt moment between father and daughter. But there was something in her eyes, a look I couldn't ignore. "Emily," I murmured, my voice strained. "You know Daddy cares about you deeply, right? But not in this way, not like this." "I understand," she replied, her voice trembling as she leaned closer. "But I can't stop thinking about you, Dad. I try to push it away, but it keeps returning." My heart raced, my body felt paralyzed. This wasn't how a father and daughter should speak or look at each other. My mind screamed at me to end this, to stop it before it went too far, but I felt rooted in place, unable to respond. "We should head back," I said, my voice unsteady. "It's getting late." Just as I turned to leave, Emily reached out and took my hand gently. Though her touch was innocent, the way her fingers brushed my skin sent a shiver through me. "It shouldn't feel this way, Dad," she said, her voice heavy with an emotion I couldn't name. "I know it's not right, but I can't control my feelings." Panic swelled within me. I pulled my hand away, stepping back, my heartbeat pounding in my chest. "Emily, we can't. This is wrong. You're my daughter, and this isn't right." She looked at me, her face a mix of confusion and hurt. "I'm not mistaken, Dad. I know what I feel." "No." I shook my head, feeling an ache rise in my chest. "This is wrong. You're my daughter, and we can't." I couldn't finish. The words felt too heavy, too dangerous to speak aloud. Emily stepped closer, her eyes fixed on mine, and I knew I had to take action to stop this before it went any further. I needed to put distance between us for both of our sakes. "We need to go home," I said, my voice as steady as I could manage. "This isn't right, Emily. We shouldn't be like this." Emily paused, looking down slightly, her voice filled with disappointment. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I didn't mean to make things awkward like this." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the emotions swirling within me. "It's all right, sweetheart," I said gently, even though I knew it wasn't truly all right. "We just need to create some space." We drove home in silence, the tension between us thicker than ever. I knew things would never be the same. Although we hadn't fully crossed any lines, a boundary had shifted, and the feeling was impossible to ignore. Once we got home, neither of us spoke another word. Emily went straight to her room, and I stood alone in the living room, glancing around the empty space. Everything looked the same, but the weight in my heart made the house feel foreign. A part of me wanted to go to her, to talk, to clarify things, but I knew that would only make everything harder. I sank onto the couch, my mind whirling. Emily was my daughter, and I never imagined that our relationship could come to this. Memories of her childhood filled my mind, times when she'd run through the house laughing, playing, with me always close, ready to protect her from any harm. Now, everything was different. Emily was an adult, no longer the innocent little girl I remembered, but I was her father, and my feelings should have stopped there. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of questions and doubts. What had led Emily to feel this way? Had I been too close to her? I wondered if I'd somehow misstepped as her father, if I'd done something wrong in raising her. What should have been a straightforward, pure relationship had grown inexplicably complex. The following morning, I woke up exhausted, hoping that the tension from the day before would have eased. But instead, it only felt heavier. Emily left her room without a word to me, and the silence between us felt stifling, as though the air itself was hard to breathe. As I sat at the dining table, Emily came downstairs, dressed neatly, obviously preparing to leave. "I'm heading back to school soon," she said, her voice calm, though I could sense the unease beneath it. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "Maybe that's for the best," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "We could both use some space." She looked at me with sorrow in her eyes, but didn't say anything else. Emily gathered her belongings, and a few minutes later, she was ready to go. I stood in the doorway, watching her walk to the car, feeling an immense heaviness in my chest. "Have a safe drive," I managed to say, my voice catching slightly. She turned back, her gaze full of conflict. "Thanks, Dad," she murmured, then quietly got into her car and drove off. I remained there, watching Emily's car fade down the familiar driveway. Once she was gone, the house felt strangely empty, unsettlingly quiet, as if a piece of its spirit had vanished, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost something irreplaceable. I hoped that some time apart would allow us to calm down, to reflect, and to sort out our emotions. Yet, deep down, I couldn't ignore that things had shifted too far, and I wasn't sure if our bond would ever be what it once was. In the weeks that followed, I tried to settle back into normalcy, but everything felt different. The silence in the house without Emily was overwhelming, and I couldn't stop my mind from drifting back to her. Memories of that moment, of her gaze, kept resurfacing in my thoughts. I wanted to believe that the distance would ease the ache, that my feelings would mellow with time, but part of me knew that once something fundamental changes, it's hard to reclaim the past. Something between Emily and me felt broken, and no matter what we did, I doubted we could return to where we had begun. One quiet weekend afternoon, I received a text from Emily. She wrote that she was working through her tangled emotions, that she understood things weren't right, and that she needed time to reflect. I read each word with a mix of sorrow and relief. Emily needed time, and so did I. Perhaps, with enough time and space, we'd find a way to rebuild our relationship, though I couldn't ignore the possibility that things might never be as they were. I sighed, setting down my phone, and looked out the window. The city in the distance remained calm, but my heart was anything but peaceful. Maybe only time would offer answers to the questions Emily and I weren't ready to face yet. This story is a reminder of the boundaries that must remain clear in family relationships, limits that should never be crossed. As parents, we're entrusted with the responsibility to care for and love our children unconditionally, but it's essential to remember that love must also include respect and clear boundaries. Life inevitably brings moments of confusion, especially as relationships evolve, but staying grounded and maintaining respectful boundaries is crucial. To any parent or anyone nurturing a close relationship, I'd emphasize the importance of clarity in our roles. Don't let emotions blur the line between parent and child or any other cherished connection. Small misunderstandings can grow into deep rifts if left unchecked, and once they appear, those rifts are challenging to mend. What I've learned is to always approach relationships with wisdom, understand right from wrong, and recognize when to step back before things go too far. Respecting boundaries is essential to safeguarding the relationships that matter most. Thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights like this.